Welcome everyone back to the collaboratory. I'm so excited that now we have this really great backlog of interviews and series about different tips and tricks for various things in terms of navigating your career and working on your personal development. Again, I'm Carlene Spusap, an account manager and recruiter with Recruitomics, working with the collaboratory, and we're back with Jaylen, who's going to be talking about some really great tips regarding changing careers. Which can be a really difficult and honestly kind of existentially traumatizing experience. And so I'm really happy that Jaylen will be walking us through ways that you can strategize around that. And I'll let Jaylen go ahead and introduce himself, and we'll take a look at some of his slides and move right along.
Yeah, thanks, Carlene. Hey, I'm Jaylen. Once again, I am a senior recruiter at Recruitomics Consulting. Really enjoy it. I love the tech and biotech space. I've gotten pretty familiar over here, so I'm happy to give some advice on changing careers. And obviously, we are specifically talking about biotech and tech spaces, but we'll kind of cover some generic topics that can be applicable to a lot of different fields and areas. So definitely check those out as we talk here, and we'll utilize those and make sure you feel prepared and ready to take that on. All right, let's get into it. So changing careers. These are some of the topics I'm going to be covering. So I'm going to cover LinkedIn profile setup because that will kind of have to change just because we want to make sure we're advertising for multiple things as well as just spicing things up for a new career path, right? So we got to update that. So I'm going to talk about how to do that as well as networking and making sure that you're meeting the right people, saying and getting incorporated into the right groups. So I will be talking about that as well as optimization for catering your resume and LinkedIn's to multiple interests at one time. Because some people are really well-rounded and have multiple skills to different areas and are open to exploring multiple things. And also likewise, somebody may find interest in multiple things and want to break into different fields. So I'll talk about how to optimize your resume and profile on LinkedIn for that as well. And luckily, we have some very helpful visuals here. We have used my profile, for example. So hopefully you all enjoyed the aesthetic and the information I've put out on my LinkedIn, because that will be an example of a lot of these slides. But we're going to talk about that LinkedIn profile setup. So we're using mine as an example. So we have some profile sections. So let's say we're wanting to optimize our profile and we want to use 2 roles using our informative summary and getting that relevant skills and experience notated there, right? So you can see on mine that I have made mine optimized for recruiting as well as communications. So I put 2 different things in my name. So you can utilize that name section to do a little bit of advertising for yourself. So I've done that here for recruiting communications. You can do this as well in your informative summary with your skills and experience on your profile. And what this does is it pulls you up into some searches by recruiters that showcase your career interests, but also your skills. And in the name section, you're doing that at the very top of your profile. So it's the first thing they see. So when you see my name, you're like, okay, I know Jaylen is either interested or good at recruiting and communications. He even said specialist, so he's probably good at that. So that is a good way to showcase that on the front end there. And it also will show up when you engage with different content on LinkedIn. So as you know, on LinkedIn, it shows your name when you engage with things. This is like a little free advertisement. So you like something, you comment your name with this little blip about recruiting communication specialist for mine will pop up with each engagement. So it's just a free way to advertise like, oh, Jaylen is good at this. So if they aren't connected with me or are just scrolling through and see the engagement, that will be something that catches their eye. Another way to catch people's eyes using emojis. And I know that may sound very zillennial of me. I'm a Gen Z millennial. So that may be something that people are like, oh, that may be that crowd that's using that. Well, I would like to interest you and kind of give you my perspective on this. So what this is about is it's just an eye catcher, right? So, I'm sure it caught your eye when you saw this, like, why is there a rocket ship next to Jaylen's name? What is going on there? It's just a good way to catch eye with people as they're engaging. So they come to my profile, it catches their eye. I engage with posts. It says my name, my specialization. It has an emoji which catches people's eye. Like, why is that there? That stands out. It's colorful. It's an object. People are visual. It's an eye catcher. So that's something you can definitely utilize to your advantage. Don't have to. It's definitely preferential, but it's just another way. So I chose a rocket. I did that because of recruiting. We are blasting off to find talent, also advancing people forward through an unknown space. That's why I chose a rocket. If you're in the biotech space, test speakers is a DNA strand. There's different things that are microscope. You're in business, you can use a briefcase. You can use I think there's a stock market chart on there. You can use cash, different things like that, tech space, computers, phones. So it's just a way to catch an eye. So definitely feel free to utilize that to your advantage as well. That name section is definitely something you can use to your advantage, as well as the headline. So once again, eye-catching. Want to catch that eye? So one thing you can do is summarize your expertise, experience, or your career interests, or you can even do all three in that headline. So you can see underneath mine, I did senior recruiter at Recruitomics. I did a DNA strand because we're in the biotech space, science. I put extrovert energy. If you know me, I don't stop talking. I love people. I'm very outgoing. So I put them there to show a little bit of personality, kind of let them know what it'd be like to interact with me. Also helpful for recruiting because you got to be a little outgoing, a little sociable to be in this field. So I put that, and I put a lightning bolt because energy, you have energy, a little zap, a little zing, a little lightning. And then I put DEI advocate. That's something I'm very passionate about. I'm doing a lot of projects here at Recruitomics with DEI. So I put that because it's important to me. I enjoy it, and it's also a big part of recruiting as well. So I put that in my headline. So it's immediately underneath. Emojis to catch the eye, kind of a brief little summary about some things about me, both personal and passion projects, as well as my job. So let's say, for an example, more specific in the biotech space, you're a genome scientist. You could put genome scientist pursuing data science passion. So let's say you're wanting to pivot careers. This is where we're talking about that pivot careers. We're pivoting into data science. You could put that. I'm a genome scientist. Maybe you've been doing a lot of data research at your job or your company. And you're like, actually, I really like this. I enjoy it. I'm more passionate about it than I expected. And so you could put in your headline, this is what I do now, but I'm pursuing a data science passion of mine. You could do what I did with my three little excerpts, and you could say genome scientist and have some sort of separator, data analyst specialist, and then another separator and say expert in both the lab and a spreadsheet. A little funny blurb about yourself, but gives an idea of, okay, they're good at both of these things, so they're interested in both these career topics, they interest them, what have you. Once again, as I said, feel free to add emojis in there, get that eye catcher. Just another way to do that. All right, the about section. I will say, I talked a lot about just a generic how to set up a LinkedIn to be successful in a previous recorded talk at Collaboratory. So definitely check that out. So I may be a little more brief in this one, but I do want to cater it more towards transitioning into a new career because that's the topic we're talking about. So if you're interested in learning about just how to set up a LinkedIn profile, check out that other Collaboratory video I did with Carlene. It's really helpful. So definitely want to talk about this. So we want to write about 3 to 5 short sentences here, just summarizing different things about yourself. That can be your career, expertise, skills, experience. And in this case, we definitely want to talk about the fields or roles we're interested in, right? So it could be 2 different fields. It could be 2 different roles in the same field. There's different ways to kind of cater this to what you're looking for. But this is a really good way to let us as recruiters know what you're looking for, what you're good at, and what you have professional experience in and what you don't, or what you do have professional experience in 2 things and you're more focused on pursuing. It's just another great way to showcase that more blatantly and at the top of the profile. So it's just a great way to utilize this section. Do keep it succinct and to the point. Once again, as I said in my previous video, we want to keep this as like an elevator pitch. It's something that we really want to make sure kind of resonates with the reader, whether it's a recruiter or an employer. And so make sure it's short, succinct, to the point. Mine, within that 3 to 5 sentences, I did a little excerpt about myself. I said I'm results driven as a recruiter and what I do at my work, and kind of my approach to my work, and then what I'm experienced in. I'm well versed in high volume staffing in the tech and biotech spaces. And then what I've been good at. I have a history of doing advancements in training and productivity and different communication approaches. And then just a little excerpt about me as a person and as a coworker and as an employee. I'm open and clear communication style. I'm positive, pretty upbeat, kind of perky. So that's kind of the energy I bring. If you're in your section, specifically, if you're changing careers, focus on saying a little bit about yourself as I did in mine. Obviously, I'm not planning on changing careers, but I did cater to both places, right? I put communications and recruiting in there. So if you notice, there's different sections. I have recruiting in a couple sentences. I have communication a couple sentences. So that's something you can do with yours if you're trying to switch careers, for example, the genome and data scientist. That's definitely something to take advantage of in this section. You can really showcase, hey, I have experience in genome science, but I've also been working on a lot of spreadsheets and data analytics for my company in that section of genome science. And I've learned a lot about it. And here's what I can do and specialize in, and kind of putting that in that about section. Like I mentioned, you can just plainly state the field. There's two ways to do this. So you can do this for two fields or roles by doing two different things. So 2 and 2, remember that, 2 for 2. So you can plainly state the field or role that you're experienced in and how your background and skills apply to the field or role you're wanting to move into. So that would be a really good one, that you are saying, I'm transitioning and pivoting from this field into this field. Here's what I have done, and here's how it pivots into this field and its transferable skills and experience. You can do that. You can also clearly state why you're interested in changing careers. Maybe you had a life change and you're just like, hey, I realized I wasn't super passionate about what I was doing. I did it for a few years and I'm kind of burnt out, or, I found this other area that I was interested in. I took advantage of some projects at work and now I'm really going to pursue that as a career. You can put that in there. You can also list bullet points of your experience and skills separately. So I'm going to use that genome and data science example again. You could list in your about section, I am a genome scientist and I'm interested in this role. Here is what I have done for genome science, and list it in bullet points. And then you can list another section and say, but here's how it transfers into data science, and then list bullet points as that. It's easy for recruiters to see. We love bullet points. We'll all tell you we love a bullet point. It's very easy and visual for us to read. So that is a great way to do that as well. So definitely utilize that about section to showcase, I'm wanting to pivot careers, I'm wanting to pivot roles, or I'm looking at both of these fields. I'm looking at both genome science and data science. Here are my skills and experience for both and why I would qualify for both. Experience. So here's a little screenshot of my time at Recruitomics Consulting. It just as a visual for people. So under each company and job title, you can list common tasks and goals that you're responsible for if they apply to both fields. So let's say you're looking at two roles in the same field. Let's say you're staying in biotech and you want to look at genome science, but you're also looking at fermentation science. You can list things that are applicable to both those. So in my example, I listed things that were applicable for both communication and recruiting. So there's, sourcing candidates, 100 plus candidates per week. That's outreach and communications, but it's also recruiting. And then you can see I, oversaw full lifecycle recruiting for 10 to 15 vacancies each quarter. That shows organization skills for both. Creating and teaching live career development. It shows a case that I can speak well and I can create content to send to people that they would understand. That's communication. And recruiting, I'm talking about recruiting topics. So I'm covering both with what I put in. That's where you could put skills that apply to two different fields, or two different roles in one field. Now, if you're wanting to do two separate fields, it gets a little more interesting, and we can do this though, y'all. So what you will do is in your experience section, you can list very plainly genome science skills. For example, I'm going to stick with that example apparently. So genome science skills and data science skills. And underneath those, you can put a colon, and you can put underneath bullet points of, here are the skills that apply to this. Here are the skills that apply to this. In this case, see how I laid them out with bullet points above, like the supporting G&A bullet point, for example. I could put, recruiting skills and then list 3 to 5 recruiting skills. And then underneath that, I could put like an indentation and then put communications skills and then put 5 bullet points under that. That way it's very, very aesthetic as far as easy to read and visible for recruiters and employers to see. Here are the skills that apply to these two different fields, because someone may be looking for both recruiters and communication candidates. But vice versa, someone could be looking for someone that is only communication or only recruiting. They do kind of go hand in hand in that situation, but if you're looking for different fields, then that, like, for example, data scientists and genome scientists, that's really helpful because someone would be like, oh, I'm only looking for a data scientist. This genome science stuff isn't really helpful to me. Well, you have it blatantly and plainly listed out for them to see. So you can do it in that tactic on your experience section. Now, skills. Definitely add those hard and soft skills that are relevant to both fields and roles. But likewise, you can list them for each individual role. And the beauty about the skills is that you have a lot more to work with because it's not going to overwhelm a reader. It's not going to overwhelm a recruiter or anyone looking at your profile or employer. So definitely utilize the LinkedIn feature where you can put role-specific skills because you can showcase what you did at each job. So here's a screenshot of that. And if you look at people's LinkedIns, a lot of people are doing this now. But for example, this is my skills for Recruitomics consulting. It is listed in my skills section specifically, but since I listed where and what company and job and role I was using them, it pulls them up under skills this way under the experience section. So it's in two places. And so that way you can see, for example, you can see I put Greenhouse ATS in the middle there. So Greenhouse, this is the first company I've used Greenhouse at for my day-to-day role. Now, I've been exposed to Greenhouse previously. I know what it is. I've used it for some of my own personal HR-related tasks. However, I didn't use it day in, day out for recruiting. And what this is showing is, okay, at Recruitomics, Jaylen was using this applicant tracking system, or ATS, and Jaylen was at this job for, as of right now, 6 months. And so that shows that for 6 months, Jaylen has been familiar with Greenhouse and using it day in, day out, as well as Loxo applicant tracking system. Now, if you did that for a few different roles, they'll be like, okay, Jaylen has 3+ years with this system. He's pretty experienced in it. And likewise, if you just listed it once in one place, they kind of have an idea of the time frame and the depth you're using it at. So it's just a good way to showcase your depth of knowledge and how long you've been using things in addition to the skills section. So you can use that. But also in this situation, with you wanting to categorize for 2 different roles or 2 different fields, you can list multiple skills here. So let's say in that genome scientist role, you were doing data science. Well, that's not in your job description, but you were doing it in projects. You can put it as a bullet in experience, but in skills, if you list, data analysis, you can put that you worked at your current company doing this along with genome science. So like, oh, for 3 years, so-and-so is using genome science and data analysis in their day-to-day role. So they were not only doing genome science, but this as well. So they're pretty experienced in it. And they may also pry about that more in the phone screen when you talk with a recruiter. They'll be like, I saw for 3 years you had data analysis. Can you talk more about what you're doing? To get a gauge of the depth of knowledge and the timeline and daily use of that. So just another way to get the conversation flowing and pull yourself up in a recruiter search as well. Because like I said, if you're trying to bring into a new career or field, it's difficult to pivot sometimes when it's something not in your job description. So this is a good way to show what you've been doing that may not be a part of your job description or extra projects you were taking on. Like I said before, you can also utilize this section. I said this in our previous collaboratory video, that you can use this as something to showcase skills you weren't able to include in your About Me or Experience sections. So let's say you use the amount of bullet points you could use, you use the 3 to 5 sentences you could use. Well, now you can showcase your skills in the skills section deliberately like this, but not worry about it clogging up your account or your profile. So this is a good way to show that you've been doing more than what you could list, because we don't want to list every single detail out in About section or Experience, because that's too much and too overwhelming to the reader. We want to be succinct and to the point. Like I said, the elevator pitch with About, and likewise with your Experience, we want to stick to 3 to 5 bullet points. We don't overwhelm a reader. If you're doing 2 different sections, it's okay to do 3 to 5 per section if you're doing 2 different fields like data scientists and genome scientists. But skills-wise, you can list, we say about 10 to 50 is a good number. And that's a lot of skills you can showcase. And likewise, each skill gets pulled up in a recruiter search. It doesn't matter how often or how little. If it's pulled up in there once, you pull it up into the searches. So it's a good way to kind of pull yourself into more recruiter searches, as well as showcase skills you couldn't fit to avoid clogging up a certain section and making it overwhelming to read. Yeah, like I mentioned, 10, 50 skills is the ideal way. We try to diversify those to show those various skills you have. Definitely stick with hard skills at first. We want to showcase specific things to the role. Hard skills are things like a certain tracking system, like I have Greenhouse ATS in there, or like diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI, that's specific. And something like a soft skill would be like teamwork or leadership or good communication or something like that. That would be more soft skills. I would stick with hard first just because that will pull you into the more specific niche skills for the role. But I think that soft skills, and in my recruiting experience, that's something we assess more in the phone screen as we're talking with you with our questions. So that's something we don't really harp on as much when we're searching in our sourcing tactics on LinkedIn. All right, let's cover that networking, because it is hard to break into a new field when you're coming from a completely different type of work into a new one. You have to meet all new people sometimes. Sometimes people have been in previous fields, but it is like starting new. So let's talk about that. So you definitely want to build relationships with potential employers or recruiters for the roles or fields you're looking for. And you can connect with them on LinkedIn by doing that. And that's a great way to connect. So one thing I would recommend is searching companies that you're interested in that are in the new fields you're looking for or the various fields you're looking for, and go to employees on those accounts and find some recruiters or find some people with similar job titles to you, things like that, and send them a connection request. And you can add a little message about, hey, I'm so-and-so. I saw your account on this company. I'm interested in learning more. I'm pivoting into a new field, and I would love some advice or some tips that you may have for me. Short and sweet to the point. A lot of people are interested in helping other people get into their field, as well as, we've all been there where we, maybe had a moment where we're trying to figure out what we're going to do with our career. And so everyone's willing to help people navigate that process for the most part. So if nothing else, you might get some great advice on how to break into the field. They may not be able to give you a direct point of contact of like a job per se. They may not even have a job open, but it's a great way to get a conversation and a connection flowing. Also, likewise, joining relevant LinkedIn groups related to your industry or the role you're wanting to look at is a great way to participate in discussions and just break into the field. So you can connect with other members on the page and group and have those discussions together. Genome science, data science, find some companies that you can have discussions with, as well as groups. Maybe there's a data analysis group, or there's a genome science discovery group of some new findings in the field. Connect in there, being engaged with the community. Connect with those people in the community. It's a great way to kind of create visibility on your name and your page, as well as have some conversations. Maybe someone says, oh my gosh, hey, we're actually hiring a genome scientist, but we want someone with a data analysis kind of expertise. And that's like obviously super niche and to the point of what you're looking for, but that is a possibility. And if that could happen, as well as maybe they know someone that is in a company that has some openings, or just keeps that conversation flowing. So definitely utilize that. Those groups are very helpful. Something else to utilize is that search bar. So we all know what a search bar is for the most part. Like there's a search bar on LinkedIn. How do we use that? So a great way to use it in this situation to network is to find companies with potential to work for them and following them. So you don't even have to like post on their page, but just following them can give you company updates before anyone else, as well as offer some visibility on current employees, like I mentioned, and just making those connections. And then also you get info from the direct source. If they're posting, they have job openings, you're getting it like that. You may have notifications set up and you're seeing it directly. You don't have to go through, job boards and things like that. So that's a great way to just take advantage of that search bar and use it to your advantage. All right, that open to work banner. Let's talk about it. It's got some pros and cons, but honestly, in the recruiting field, I feel like there's mostly pros. So let's talk about it. So if you're currently employed, excuse me, if you're currently employed and you want to turn this on, excuse me, 1 second. I'm talking so much, you guys. So one thing you can do is if you're currently employed and you want to turn this on, LinkedIn allows you to privately advertise this to recruiters or likewise people that are not working at your company. So One way to utilize this is you can use it privately or publicly. My voice is coming back, y'all, I swear. So if you use it privately, what you can do is turn this on, and only recruiters and people not working in your company can see your preferences, and set it to location, interest in role, as well as, hours, commute, things like that. So you can use that. And then also, if you turn it on, let's say you're self-employed or you don't care if an employer sees it or something like that, then everyone has like a free advertisement that you're open to work when you comment, engage, or post on any type of site. And that is just free advertisement for you. So I would definitely say utilize it if you can. If you want to stay private for employer purposes, or, just to be a little more discreet, that's totally fine. But recruiters and people at your company can still see it. So definitely utilize that to your advantage, especially if you're wanting to switch careers, because what can happen is your profile may showcase both skills, but if you put what you're interested in, a recruiter will see that. So at the top, I've seen this many times. I'm sure Carlene has as well. People will say that they have been doing something for a long time, but they're wanting to switch careers. And in that open to work section, when we see their preferences, it'll say what their roles are they're looking for. So that's something else that can be showcased in that open to work. So it only clears the air for recruiters on the front end. As I mentioned, definitely feel free to turn it on. It's free advertisement for you to people on your connections, engagement, and things. So it can only be beneficial to you if it's turned on. But like I said, if you need it to be private, feel free to do that. Recruiters and people not your company will still be able to see it as they're sourcing candidates. So it's still able to be seen by those people, but it's not as publicly advertised. All right, let's talk about optimization for multiple interests at once while I get more water. Hydration is key, you guys. Okay, so let's say you have multiple interests, as we've been talking about, or maybe you're just really well-rounded and you have a lot of skills and experiences that you can showcase. And then there is a how would you cater your resume and LinkedIn portion of this I want to discuss. So let's talk about catering your resume and LinkedIn sections. That'll include the skills, experience. There's different areas in the LinkedIn profile you can do this. So let's talk about those. Let's say, for example, we'll cover both because there's two ways that this can happen. So let's cover if you have one career field that you're looking for, but you have two different job titles, but everything's in the same career field. You're wanting to find skills and experiences that cover both. So let's talk about that. Example, mine, I did recruiting and communication. And in my about section, I catered that to cover both of those skills because it's the same field, but it's different skills. So while the skills and job sections can include something like, maybe drafting 50 plus email templates per week or meeting with candidates and stuff like that, that would cover both jobs because they're in the same field, and both of those skills are transferable to both of those career fields, recruiting and communications. However, let's say you have two career fields that you're looking at, but a different job title in both, right? You're like, where do I even begin? There are ways to advertise those separate skills and experiences in your profile, which I've kind of elaborated on, but I wanted to make sure I really hit it home here. So an example, data scientists and genome scientists, clearly on top of mind for me. So it's two different fields of science, and they're different, but you can list those special interests in the sections in different ways. So an example here is for the about section. I kind of gave you an example. Here's a visual for those that are visual like myself. I'm very passionate about science, and my range goes all the way from data all the way to genome sequencing. I have X years, you put the number in there, of working with data and X years in genome sequencing. And below are some of my top skills and experiences for both. Bullet point them out. We have data bullet points and we have genome sequencing bullet points. And that was just a very easy way for a recruiter to be like, perfect, exactly what I needed. I need to know how many years I had of this, how many years of this, and what skills I need to look for. Obviously, this is the about section, top of profile, easy way to have all that on the front end. Like I said, list those bullet points out. I would say about 3 to 5 if you're going to do separate skills. I think that's a good summary, and obviously get your foot in the door with a recruiter, to talk about more of your skills. So remember, your profile is not supposed to sell everything to the recruiter. You want to sell getting into a phone call or an interview with a recruiter. That is what we're going to do. It's like a little snippet. Think of it like a movie trailer. You don't want to give the entire movie away in the trailer. No one's going to see the movie. If you give a little bit to get people's interest in the trailer, you get them in the theater. So that's a good way to kind of view your resume as well as your LinkedIn. Obviously, we want to give a lot away to the extent of letting us know what you're doing as recruiters, so we can, advocate for you and know you're right for the position, or like learn more about you in the interview. But you don't want to give so much away that we feel like we basically interviewed you and maybe it wasn't detailed enough or something. We're just kind of like, well, we have a lot of other profiles to go through, or someone, is fitting more of this niche, what we're looking for, pique our interest more, whatever. So definitely just give enough to get us in a call with you. So 3 to 5 bullet points is a great way to do that. And if you do those separate sections, it lets us know you qualify for both and that you're open to either career path as well. So very helpful for us. So unlike your LinkedIn profile, this is the resume portion. I know this is a niche and nuanced thing. So unlike your LinkedIn profile, which you can only have one of, you can create 2 resumes. You can do that if you want to, and they can be specialized for each role or the field you're applying for. The only thing I would recommend here is make sure you save them with different names or titles, but don't make the title so obvious that you have 2 different ones, because sometimes recruiters will see that as like, a suspicious, maybe it's like a misleading resume, or maybe you're one of those people, you just have so many skills that you just made a bunch of resumes for different fields or different role titles, and you don't actually have an in-depth experience, but you're trying to get a job. We've seen some of those, unfortunately. So make sure it's not like, in my example, Jaylen Haluska communications resume and then Jaylen Haluska recruiting resume, because then it's like, well, if it's the recruiting resume, what other resumes do they have? And is this completely truthful or like as accurate of a resume? It's just a little suspicious. But if you do it in some sort of way of like first name underscore last name, or first name, last name underscore. And then for yourself, if that's like confusing for you, like, oh, which one did I make? Obviously you can click into it and see before you upload it into an application, but also you can put them in separate folders, make a genome scientist resume folder and a data scientist resume folder and put it in there. I personally have one resume, and I did similar to my profile. I have it catered to both because I just enjoyed that better, and my fields are in the same, my roles are in the same field. So prior to applying for this job, I was applying to both communications and recruiting. And I really want to stay in recruiting, and thankfully this worked out in my favor, but I applied with one resume. But some people, if it's really niche and they want to showcase their skills really specifically, have 2 different resumes, put them in separate folders labeled, and then just change like an underscore, or maybe you do your first initial last name or something like that. That's totally fine too. Just make sure it's not so plainly stated that it's confusing for recruiters thinking you have multiple resumes that may not be accurate. I will say also, we are checking your LinkedIn as well as your resumes when you apply. So if you're trying to look for 2 different career fields, optimize that LinkedIn for both fields and roles. And then you can have a specific resume for each field or role, and that'll just show the recruiter and give them more clarity on your multiple interests, because they can see, oh, well, they applied and their entire resume is just genome science, but on their LinkedIn, it shows their interest in genome science and data science. So they gave me the genome scientist resume. Just another way to show, clarity to the recruiter of what you're looking for, but also you can list more skills specifically on your resume that you may not have been able to include on your LinkedIn and vice versa. So definitely feel free and empowered to do those 2 resumes. That is my last slide. I just talked for a little while, as you can tell from my multiple gulps of water. Does anyone have any questions, Carlene, for us?
Yeah, for sure. It looks like we've got some people on the live stream. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear them. I think people have also been posting in the Slack. So maybe, if you don't want to post here, you're welcome to post there also, and multiple recruiters can chime in. But until we see anyone in the comments, there are a few things I want to bring up. I know someone in the Slack was asking specifically, they've been in academia as a bioinformatician, they really love working with Python and R. And so, what are some strategies that one might take when making that pivot? Because I think that's something that's really popular in terms of, people in academia or people who recently left academia is moving from, the wet bench to the dry bench world. And I think, there are interesting ways in which you can showcase those skills. I think in terms of listing your skill set, it can be really helpful for recruiters if you are actually able to distinguish how much experience you have with different kinds of tools for bioinformatics. So say, you have 5 years experience with Python and you're actually self-taught because during grad school, you were working with these huge data sets. And so you taught yourself how to use Python. So you have 5 years of experience with Python, but maybe later on in your career, you started learning MATLAB or R, and you actually took formal classes for that. And you might put, 3 years of experience with X, Y, and Z on your resume. And that can be super helpful because oftentimes we'll talk to candidates who have both on their resume, but then when you talk to them, they technically have experience in that, but it's not usually their bread and butter. And so you can have kind of a disconnect in that way when you're talking with a potential team that you're really interested in. And then also in terms of showcasing dry bench skills, I see candidates all the time who have like their personal websites or maybe some type of like GitHub or Reddit page that's linked to their LinkedIn that shows like, hey, here's a project that I worked on. You can actually see, the types of platforms that I've developed, maybe even some of the things that you showcase are like personal projects that you did, which can always be really fun. So there are really, interesting, unique, creative ways that you can showcase your skills, especially if it's not something that you were formally doing in a previous position. It looks like we have a comment here. I'm curious from Zoe, curious if people coming out of school should leave themselves open for multiple paths or try for one, which is most successful. Jaylen, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, good question. So it kind of depends on you, right? So obviously, if you want to hone in on one area, that is definitely something feel empowered to do. If you feel like you have enough skills and experience to apply to multiple pathways, I almost would feel like more the merrier in a sense if you're passionate about it. Now, I don't know how each individual is. I'm definitely a passion over paycheck person. People hear me say that all the time. I'm not money motivated, which is a pro and a con sometimes. But I definitely want to do something I want to do. So if it's you have multiple things you want to do and you really can't decide, apply to multiple things, pursue those multiple pathways, especially fresh out of school. You can really showcase a lot of your skills from jobs while in undergrad, as well as classes. If you're doing internships, things like that, think of the field you're wanting to look into. And like I said before, find those skills that cover both of those fields or multiple fields, or make separate resumes or things like that and cater your LinkedIn to showcase those things. I don't think there's one way that's more successful than the other. I think it genuinely is just based on the field. For example, the recruiting field right now is very much an employer's market. There's so many people that are in recruiting that unfortunately due to a lot of layoffs are looking for jobs. And so if like, for example, if you're coming straight out of school and you're looking at recruiting or another field and that other field had a lot more job opportunities, you're going to be more successful pursuing that pathway than the latter. So if you're able to look into the market and the job market and kind of what is has more job availability than others, that would probably be how you would decide if multiple paths or one path is more successful. I genuinely do think it's up to each individual as well as that job market and how it's going at this point in time. Because as we all know, with COVID and just working remote and AI coming out and things like that, a lot of the job market is kind of changing and fluctuating right now. So it just kind of depends on what pathways you're looking at. I believe Zoe asked this question. So I would say there's not like a straightforward answer. I know it's a shade of gray. But that's my opinion is if you have multiple skills that are transferable and you have a couple fields of interest that you genuinely could see yourself going in, I would do all of them. It can't hurt you. It's a little bit more time, but it could be worth it. So that would be my opinion. But I don't know if I would say it's more successful. I would just say it's a personal preference. But Carly, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll go ahead and take your slides down. But yeah, I think, usually when people think about the job market, I think there's generally this instinct that, like, oh, if you have industry experience, you're like automatically more qualified or you're automatically going to be more successful. And I don't think that's necessarily true, depending on the types of teams that people are developing. One leg up that you have as someone coming straight out of academia is that you are someone that can be molded. You might not necessarily know that, oh, I'm going to join this like 10-year career path doing X, Y, and Z. When hiring managers or teams are considering people coming straight out of school, especially referring back to the previous example of going from a wet bench to a dry bench, they're really interested in someone that they can actively mentor. People going between different companies, especially if you're comparing someone moving from, like a Moderna or a Pfizer to a startup company or something that's more, like strategy or project management based. There are usually certain mindsets or protocols that people often bring from those companies to other organizations. And I would say that a lot of people, especially people in leadership, can sometimes struggle when they're trying to basically convert someone to their own model. And I think, when you're coming straight out of school, it can be really intimidating to consider, multiple career paths, and exhausting to try to like adapt your resume and your cover letter for like each thing. And it's a ton more work to consider multiple options rather than one. But in some ways, that's great practice. You really are auditing your experience, but also, what's important to you. And also, when you're applying to several types of positions, your first job, you don't have to continue doing your first job for the rest of your life. I think a lot of people coming out of academia, the first job that they decide to become a program manager or doing scientific writing. You can find out in just that first 1 to 2 years that you actually hate doing that. And I think what's really great about the very beginning of your career is that there is less eyebrow raising when you are trying to explore and figure out those different things. I would say that if you're already, like 10, 15 years into a career, it can be a little bit harder to make that pivot. So take this time, the first few years of you coming straight out of school to really, discover what you're interested in. We're talking about pivoting in terms of coming straight out of school right now, but make sure that a year from now, 2 years from now, that if you're unhappy, that you give yourself the grace that you deserve and make the pivot that you need. So you might have a few options out there that you're not so sure about, but this will be a great time to troubleshoot and figure out what's really important to you.
Very well said.
Any other questions? I'd love to continue on this topic in the Slack channel as well. Great, I hope this is super helpful, Zoe. And of course, if you have specific questions about ways that you want to diversify your skill set, I really loved Jaylen's example about, like if you have your resumes titled like, this is my program management resume versus this other resume, or like when people have like the name of the company. I mean, like, obviously we know they should be applying to different companies because of the job market, but no, it's great. I'd never really thought about that. So thanks for bringing that up, Jaylen.
Yeah, of course. It's just a very niche thing that people don't think about. But then when you see a resume that specifies a a certain job title, you're like, well, I don't know.
Or someone they upload the wrong one. Like a different.
Yes, that's happened before.
That reminds me. Another thing you can do, to kind of reduce the burden of updating your resume for different jobs, is that you can make make your master version of your resume that's longer than that one page. Say it ends up being like 3 or 4 pages that really breaks down specific things. When say you're applying for a job that's more writing versus more like hardcore science, just rearranging those sections so that, the first half is more about science communication and writing, and the second half is more of your hardcore, like web bench skills. That helps, instead of you rewriting and restructuring the whole thing, is just creating different sections. So maybe you're in grad school and you don't formally have science writing experience, but maybe, if you were working with certain kinds of clubs or the mentorship that you were doing, proofreading, posters and manuscripts for other students, that can be a helpful way to highlight that as well.
Yeah. Or even throwing it in that about section, if you want at the top of your LinkedIn, for example, you can showcase, hey, I've been volunteering at X place doing X thing. If you don't have it professionally, it can be showcased there, and that offers a lot of insight to recruiters as well. Because some jobs don't give you the opportunity to do certain things. Your job role may be confined to a certain space, or somebody else's job is to do that, and you can't really overlap, and that's okay. But if you have been doing that skill at other places, you can showcase that in your about section, take advantage of adding some volunteer work, or if you did projects, putting it in your experience section. Maybe it's not your day-to-day, but saying shadowed and worked on X project. Obviously, watch those NDAs. Don't over disclose things. But yeah, you can, make your LinkedIn your own. Advertise yourself.
Yeah, and having a really strong About Me section is super helpful too, because it makes it easier for the recruiter to send the hiring manager a quick message about, their top skills, but also their top aspirations. I have some friends who are actually graduating with their PhDs in the next few months, and, they're always curious about, like what are recruiters actually looking for? And I think when companies and teams are considering people coming straight out of school, a lot of it is like, what do they want to do? Are they looking to get away from the bench? Are they looking to be involved more so in mentorship and things like that? And in some ways, your ambitions for certain teams is more important than what actual skills you have.
Right. There are a lot of people that want someone who's trainable. So if you have the drive and the passion, they can teach you the skills. They want people who want to be there. A lot of places. Some places want some more experience, but they also have to want to be there. So if you got that part, you got half of it down. But yeah, definitely a lot of molding done, especially straight out of school and academia. Definitely.
Yeah, give a few moments to see if anyone else have any comments or questions they want to drop in the comment section. Also, like I mentioned earlier, happy to see what people, their thoughts and questions also in the Slack. I am excited that there have been so many people joining us there in the past, 36 hours. So that's been a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, even if you don't have any questions, feel free to throw a comment in there and say something that was helpful or something that maybe you learned. We love hearing some feedback as well.
Yeah, and if there's a topic that you're really curious about that we haven't produced any videos about or did any videos about, like we're more than happy to get any suggestions, because it's likely that if it's something that would help you, that it would help a lot of people out there. So you're a valuable resource for everyone else in the collaboratory also. But yeah, I think with that, we'll, let people go on and enjoy the rest of their Wednesday, and we'll see you back here soon.